National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.
It started when I was a child. I can remember being night blind, not being able to see things at night when I was around 5 to 7 years of age. That's when it started. I didn't realize I was losing my sight. I just thought everybody else had problems seeing at night like I did. My name is Jerry Whittle, and I'm from Ruston, Louisiana. It wasn't until about 15 when I really realized that I was legally blind at that time, still could see some. I played baseball. I was big into sports, and I was on the American Legion baseball team in Seneca, South Carolina. I grew up in South Carolina, and I was playing in the outfield, and I was a pitcher and an outfielder, and so at night we had a game with artificial lighting, and I had never played under artificial lighting before. And so when I got into the left field, I could not even see the ball leave the pitcher's hand, and the guy hit a baseball out in my area, and I didn't see it, and it landed about 5 feet from me. And my baseball coach kind of ran out and said, "What's the matter with you? Aren't you cussling?" And I said, "No, sir, I can't see the ball." And so he brought me into second base, and I couldn't see the ball there either. So I remember walking off the field and realizing that I had lost my sight. It was kind of a tough time for me. I turned in my uniform, which I hated to do. And I continued to play sports in the daytime, but I couldn't play anything at night. And then my sight gradually decreased. I had been working in a bookstore, a university bookstore, Clemson, South Carolina, at the Clemson University bookstore. And I continued working there for several years. And I started doing some alternative techniques for blindness. I didn't realize it at the time. I would spend time after hours memorizing where everything was. And so I would go back in the stock room everywhere, and I just kind of found things and located where they were located. And so I didn't realize I was making myself indispensable for the job, because none of the other part-time students knew where the stuff was, and so they were always coming to me to get everything, so I knew where everything was. But it wasn't because of anything special. I just had to learn how to do it that way because I was losing my sight. And then in 1973, I tried to get some training in Arkansas, and I wasn't ready for it. I went there, and I just was not prepared for the stuff that I went through at the center there. Was just too babying and too custodial for me. So I left and sort of went around a little bit, and I saw an ad on television with Dr. Jernigan talking about the National Federation of the Blind. And so I wrote him a letter using a big Pentel marker. By this time I'd lost enough of my sight I had to almost write with a magic marker. And I sent him this large print letter. And unbeknownst to me, he had sent that letter back to Mr. Capps, who was president of the National Federation of the Blind of South Carolina. And he took the letter and organized a chapter in my area and sent some people up to volunteers to organize a chapter. And they contacted me. And all of a sudden, I became president of the Oconee chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of South Carolina. Well, I was very shy, and so I wasn't used to running anything, and I'd never been called upon for any kind of leadership role. And so I had to learn pretty fast. And it was the beginning of a new life for me, because I began to hear the philosophy of the blind, the National Federation of the Blind, and I began to learn some of the techniques from some of my fellow blind people. And so I decided to go back to college. I had tried to go to Clemson in 1966, but I didn't have the skills of blindness, and I couldn't keep up, and so I dropped out. But I went back in 1976 with an understanding of how to use readers, how to take notes, how to do some things to get around with a cane, things I couldn't do before. And so I graduated with honors. I pulled my grade point ratio up. I made 4.0, straight A average for 3 years, and pulled my average up above 3.5, and so I graduated with honors from Clemson. And I went to the University of Tennessee and got a master's degree there, and I got a full scholarship and fellowship to Tennessee based on my grades. And then I began to teach English at the University of South Carolina. And so in 1985, after I taught English at the University of South Carolina, working on a PhD degree in English, Joanne Wilson contacted me in Maryland to come out to Louisiana to work in a training center, an NFB type training center. And so on a whim, I gave up the PhD because I really wanted to work with blind people. And Marilyn gave up her work as an art teacher And we came to Louisiana in 1985, and I became the Braille instructor there, and I taught Braille for over 30 years, which was one of the joys of my life. And while I was there, I was telling Joanne about doing a play. That I had done a play as a blind person with some other blind actors. It was called Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, and we did it as a fundraiser. And we kind of got hooked on acting, and so I told her we should do plays with the students. And so she said, well, why don't you just write a play? And I said, oh, well, okay, I guess I could write a play. And so I started writing plays, and so every year we started doing those as part of our fundraising activities at the National Federation of the Blind. So we've done plays now for 23 years, and this year we're going to have another one tonight, as a matter of fact. I always wanted to be a writer. It was part of one of my dreams to write novels. I had published some short stories and won a couple of writing contests when I was a younger man, and actually got money for them. So that kind of put it in my mind that I'd like to be a writer. And I had written a story at the University of Tennessee. It was about my father and the night he died, and it was published in a magazine called The Phoenix. Well, I got one fan letter from a student from Tennessee. His name was Jim Rylander Jr. I can still remember it. He told me that I should be a writer. I shouldn't be anything but a writer. And so I wrote him back and told him if I ever got published, I was going to send him a copy of my first book. And so I've been trying to find Jim Rylander Jr. since I got published. So since I retired, I'm a retired Braille teacher now after 30-something years. And I'm doing what I really want to do. I'm writing novels, and I've written 5 novels that are now on Amazon Kindle ebooks. And I'm currently working on a nonfiction book involving growing up in Clemson, my hometown, and what it was like to grow up in the 1950s. So it's kind of like a memoir, but it's going to be a book I'm going to try to get published by the Clemson University Press. I'm not going to put it on Amazon until I get it published. But I have published some short stories and magazines and stuff, but the main thing is the novel writing, which I really enjoy. So I'm basically, after all this time, doing the thing I really want to do, and I really enjoy it, and that would be writing novels. And that is the story of my life. I'm Jerry Whittle, and I'm living the life I want.
For more information about the National Federation of the Blind, please visit www.nfb.org or call 410-659-9314.